never thought he'd see people stand in line to see the boy king. How'd you get so funky? Did you do the monkey? Born in Arizona, moved to Babylonia.
Welcome to Framework. This is John, one of the hosts of Framework. Joining me, as always, is the other host of Framework, Al. How are you today, Al?
Pretty good, John.
Yeah, and joining us as well, regular guest of the program, Chris Prentice. How are you, Chris?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me back, guys. It's always a pleasure, and I hope you guys are doing well.
Thank you. I have gathered us together today to talk about Steve Martin. Yeah, and turns out I'm a big fan of Steve Martin, and I kind of forgot it for some reason. I guess I've kind of just created a version of myself in my head that, I don't know, that based my personality as a child on Bill Murray, kind of, the way I remember being a kid was
At
trying
least
to be
aspiring to be.
yeah.
That.
Oh yeah. No. Didn't come close, but wanted very much to be Peter Venkman. So, the image of myself I had was just like a little annoying kid running around trying to be an asshole. And I kind of realized recently, I just started the show, the new Steve Martin show, Only Murders in the Building, the Hulu original show that he's doing right now about true crime podcasts, which, by the way, is pretty good. It is a nice return to form for Steve Martin.
I keep hearing pretty good about that one.
It is pretty good. It's not amazing, but it's pretty good.
Nobody seems to be willing to go that far, but everybody who watches it seems to like it.
Yeah, it's nice to see him doing something good. I'll put it that way.
All I know about it, I do need to watch that, but I've seen little clips of him, Martin Short, and I guess Selena Gomez. She's also in it. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Surprisingly quite good in it.
Yeah, I've seen little clips where all three of them are on a talk show promoting it, and it's whenever I see those little clips or little images, I just feel bad for Chevy Chase. I just feel like, oh man, he got dropped for Selena Gomez. I mean,
well, he made his bed.
I know he made. Yes, I understand. I still feel bad for him, regardless.
It's a really neat show, and what's nice about it is it's kind of it's a fulfillment of the promise of streaming series. You know how after Louis C.K.'s show happened and everyone was like, well, artists are going to have this chance to create their own personal things now. And it's going to be great. We're actually going to get to see what these people can do, just left to their own devices. And this actually is that with Steve Martin. It's kind of neat. It's kind of Wes Anderson-y, kind of Woody Allen-y, as he had a bit of that streak in him, Steve Martin, and it's good. It's nice to see him doing a good thing. But what it did mostly was I was just, hang on, dude. I think I actually love Steve Martin. I think I loved Steve Martin for a very long time, and I kind of went down a little bit of a rabbit hole. I looking at his IMDb page, and I was really struck. He's such a contradictory guy in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
this was the most influential guy on me as a kid. It was the albums, the albums, the SNL appearances, wild and crazy guy. I was that obnoxious kid. I wasn't trying to be Bill Murray. I was literally quoting lines from Steve Martin comedy albums at people. I was that kind of obnoxious kid. When they do that in Step Brothers, the Will Ferrell movie, it cuts to the bone for me because I'm just like, oh shit! I remember my first drink. All those lines that are straight out of the album that you just try to, as a kid, recycle into your daily life.
How many consecutive Halloweens were you King Tut?
I never went that far exactly, but
No?
I had the arrow through the head. And the bunny ears,
yes.
I was, like a little 7-year-old kid running around with hey, I'm a wild and crazy guy. It was probably cute, but also probably really annoying.
It's a fine line.
Yeah. Kids
kids
can walk it better.
Only Murders in the Building. That's the Martin Short line for me. Yeah, I think it's stopped me from watching that show is Martin Short's real hit or miss for me. And when he misses, he misses. He misses big.
Oh, he sure does, but he's good in that show, man. It's a dramatic role for him. It's very interesting.
Yeah, and Steve Martin seems to bring out the better end of him. So,
yeah, they've kind of formed a partnership now. I mean, it almost seems like they only work together doing weird little Netflix comedy specials. They had that thing a few years back. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
It came out like the same week as Nanette. The
there's a double header.
and it's just like it almost seems like a response to this, these guys who have been making comedy for 30 years, just comfortable rich white dudes just phoning in a nonsense night of kind of bullshit comedy.
Yeah.
I think the special is called like an evening you'll forget for the rest of your life, I believe is the title.
Yeah, I mean they're owning it.
That's my favorite, probably my favorite. Well, one of my favorite bits that Martin did on Saturday Night Live was the monologue, literally about phoning it in, and how he's finally going to give a damn again. It was when he hosted he hosted in the early '90s, and the cast is super excited. They want to hear all the stories about the '70s, and he just he can't be bothered. They ask him to rehearse a sketch. He says, "Well, aren't there going to be cue cards? And what's the problem?" And it's that's one of probably my favorite bits he ever did on there was that whole. That's one of the best opening monologues ever, really.
That is. He also did just one of the best sketches overall, best monologues, best Christmas thing ever is Steve Martin's Christmas Wish.
Yeah.
Like it does not matter how many times I see that. I could know every sentence he's going to say, but he just slays with it every time. I mean, it's incredible.
That is a yearly tradition.
Almost nobody does a comic monologue like Steve Martin. He is so good at the timing. He is so smart about these things, like because he is an actor too. Like I think he just kind of stumbled into that based on his background, which was all comedy clubs and theme park magic shows. Apparently,
Yeah.
He was a big magic guy, banjo guy, vaudeville guy, and somewhere along the line, he just became a very talented actor as well. I mean, he's, seems like a very talented guy in general. I imagine if you star in 30 films, you're going to pick up something along the way. But kind of right from the
some people have avoided it.
Fair. But he's a polyglot. He's
sure.
Hey, there's no need for slurs. There's no need for slurs on this show.
I think it's a polymath when you're talking about a person too.
Oh, I absolutely could have got that wrong. I'm no polymath.
You use the Oriental version.
Ooh,
my goodness.
So I mean, sorry. We were going to try and go somewhat in order here.
Yes.
Are we still on Saturday Night Live, or are we moving on to his solo work?
It all sort of concurrent in the 70s and 80s. I mean, all the SNL appearances, especially early on, are kind of legendary in their way. They're it's so weird what hits. King Tut is like synonymous with him for the rest of his career. It's the strangest novelty song thing that just picked up. I guess because it's an earworm more than anything, and he does a funny dance that you don't forget. But all his stuff back then, every SNL appearance.
I gotta say that I like a lot of the stuff I've seen that he did on Saturday Night Live. But the whole wild and crazy guys thing, I kind of chalked that up as you had to be there. I feel like that's one that, it's like, well, I guess I can see where people would find it funny, but that's one of those classic SNL things that, King Tut I like. I don't know, the wild and crazy guys, not as much.
Yeah. Maybe that's like a stereotype that has not aged well, not because it's become super offensive over time the way most of them have, but just like, do we have this? Is this a type of person that anybody under the age of 50 has ever encountered? Like, are we familiar with this is this a cultural phenomenon? I mean, maybe it was in 1976. Who knows?
I guess.
Those characters also are hilarious to me because they appeal to children so explicitly in just that they have funny voices that you can imitate, and they walk funny, and they have funny clothes, and they're just sort of generally goofy guys. But the entire premise of them is that they're foreigners who want to get laid. Is the entire joke?
They're sex pests.
Yeah,
I mean, I suppose
goes straight over your head.
It would be like if a 12-year-old watched a Roxbury sketch, they would probably be like, okay,
100%.
It's it's I guess it's all relative, and that's kind of how I looked at them. Seeing those sketches like in the late '80s and early '90s for the first time was like, well, you had to be there.
Honestly, there was the last Saturday Night Live that aired when we're recording this was Zoe Kravitz hosted, and there was a Cut for Time sketch where that was uh, Chris Redden and Keenan Thompson just approaching her and her friend at the while they're pumping gas and being sex pests. Doing hey, I just want to can I talk to you for a minute? Blah blah. It's not a bad sketch, but it occurred to me when I was watching it like that it was a sort of in a lineage that went back through the Roxbury guys and all the way to the wild and crazy Czechoslovakian guys. It's a pair of dudes bothering women,
Yeah.
and apparently you can refresh that every 25 years or so.
It's the evolution of comedic harassment.
Yeah, relatable and evergreen. Yeah.
Yeah. But Steve Martin was a pioneer in it. Congrats, Steve.
Okay, so obviously all that stuff hits very large. He's the biggest stand-up comedian. He's the one of the most popular people on this show that he's not even really on, and he gets this amazing classic right out of the gate when he makes his first starring movie, The Jerk, Carl Reiner film.
Yeah.
I'll admit this isn't my favorite, but it's sort of undeniable as well. Like talk about delivering comic monologues. I mean, he does a lot of these in that he nails in here that are now kind of famous. That the one about how many days it's felt like since he met Bernadette Peters is. I mean, I've seen that in acting classes for years. It's great, and he's great, and he's an obvious star right away.
Yeah, I'd say it's
Well,
my favorite of those first batch of the Carl Reiner movies that he did.
It's the cleanest for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I think it's a real landmark in kind of the dumb guy comedies. It's definitely one of those hallmarks of that subgenre, and so yeah, that's of those that first wave of movies he did. I mean, that's to me that's clearly the best one.
It's the most straight down the line hit too, and like you said, yes, it is. It feels like templative for a lot of comedies that are going to come after, which are the premise is basically what if a guy was weird and dumb. Like
yep.
there's a lot of like Adam Sandler versions of this. There,
Yes,
anyone from SNL tries to make The Jerk, basically.
Yeah, this basically that I feel like this was the template for the first half dozen Jim Carrey movies, the first 15 Adam Sandler movies, and yeah, that this was the one. The other ones that he did with Reiner, I'm not as into. Like Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid, like that's a good idea. It's like after 20 minutes, it's like, oh, well, this was a funny idea, and then it kind of I'm done with it.
Have you seen that one, Al? That one's weird.
No, so I'm kind of along for the ride on this one. I'm not coming into this having like a very strong opinion of Steve Martin because I realized I have not seen a lot of his stuff like all the way through. I've never seen The Jerk start to finish.
Wow,
it's a movie of pieces for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of pieces of a lot of stuff. And I like the pieces I've seen of The Jerk. I like the pieces of LA Story I've seen are great, but I've never actually got ordered it up to watch from start to finish. Because in a lot of my Steve Martin, I guess, intake came from like the pre-streaming era where I was seeing bits and pieces of things on cable. But I think of like feature length stuff. I think I've seen like Three Amigos and Spies Like Us.
He's not even in that.
Oh no, that's right.
Yeah.
That's the other.
That's another amigo. Another amigo and another wild and crazy guy.
Bowfinger. Yeah, that's right. It's a wild and crazy guy and an amigo, and I just felt like there was a Steve Martin shaped hole in that movie.
No, he would have helped. I'll grant you that.
Sure. It couldn't have hurt anything. But yeah, everything else, it seems like I've caught bits and pieces here and there, and so I have a vibe of him.
Yeah, well, that's
a
how.
For an opinion.
Like you said, where you're kind of catching bits and pieces of these movies. Like growing up, that's kind of how I saw most of these. Like when I think of All of Me, like All of Me is sort of the movie that would always come on Saturday afternoons when like a San Francisco Giants baseball game ran long, and they'd be like, "Oh, we now take you to All of Me already in progress." That was like the
Yeah,
I don't know if I don't know
I
if I
recall
ever
that.
really I don't know if I ever really saw the first 15 minutes of All of Me. It would just kind of cut to Steve Martin walking around all crazy, and there that's pretty much how I remember that movie. So yeah, all these earlier ones, I pretty much would always just see them on broadcast TV. And I mean, I liked, obviously I loved The Jerk, but then when it got to Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid, and The Man with Two Brains, like I feel like I should have laughed harder at that one, but it didn't quite
I like
stick
that
with
one.
me. Yeah, a lot of people like that
Okay.
one.
Okay, I want to explain Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid to Al because it is such an insane, weird movie. It
It's an
is,
awesome idea.
yeah, it is
It's a noir
it's
parody,
a
right?
noir parody. It's black and white. He is playing a private eye, very much in the Sam Spade mold, and it's sort of a satire. I mean, it's it plays a little more straight than you feel like, and then it'll have like a really stupid joke after after 5 minutes of no jokes. That's kind of the vibe. The big thing is that most of the movie is scenes with Steve Martin interacting with people from films that are like 40, 50 years old, that they have cut into this movie.
Yeah.
They've got scenes of like Vincent Price doing a noir from the 50s that they have written a scene around so they can include the Vincent Price side of the conversation and the Steve Martin side of the conversation. And that's like half
So
the
it's
film. Yeah.
the whole movie is that weird Sopranos scene where they put Nancy Marchand's head
Oh
on
yes.
somebody else's body after she died.
Yeah.
Kinda.
A good
Yeah.
a good chunk of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
I mean,
and to me
the
it's
fun of it is
funny.
kind of like,
It's funny for about a half hour, and then it kind of loses me. It's like it's one of those things that it probably, if it was now, it would probably just be a half hour Netflix special of some sort. There's not enough meat on the bone for me to make it a whole movie.
yeah, they're very much hamstrung by having to match all these
Yeah.
conversations into their narrative.
It sounds interesting to me though that that's sort of a different style of parody that has clearly like not lost out in the arms race here.
Yeah.
Where the dominant form of, I guess, spoof we would call it, is the airplane or Naked Gun style, where it's just machine gun, gag 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 as fast as you can, and the hope is that if half of them don't work, they're coming at you so fast that you're still like going to be on the hook with a lot of them. Whereas this other thing is probably more difficult to pull off. But uh, honestly, it can get huge laughs from me. I think of it as the documentary now style, which is what
Yeah.
it sounds like you were describing here, where it does a really like kind of loving, spot on homage to the style of the thing, and sometimes for a minute or two at a time without a gag, and then we'll drop some like kind of deadpan drop some extreme absurdity into this otherwise very grounded recreation they have created, and that can be hysterically funny to me. But I guess it requires a little more investment. Certainly, in a post YouTube era, I can see how it's maybe not never gonna overtake the joke every 5 seconds style.
Yeah, well, I mean, it is a singular experience to watch this movie. Like, maybe this is something you'd be. You know what? I'm going to recommend other films for you to check out after this. This is not going to be one of them. I mean, it's kind of a failed experiment, but it is a fascinating film. Like,
No,
there-
I'm glad it exists. I'll say that.
yeah, it's a weird one to just be out there, and especially to be this early in a career. Like, this is a big swing, to follow The Jerk up with, and they did. And he also made a movie in there called Pennies from Heaven, which nobody has seen,
Yeah,
which is sort of a sad musical, where it is a drama. It's about a guy who is a kind of a jerk, and I believe he gets hung at the end for a crime he didn't commit, and no one likes it. But another big swing. Very strange. The weirdness of the movies he's making. Because after Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid is The Man with Two Brains, another Carl Reiner thing, and it's sort of another noir thing, but also kind of a mad scientist thing. It's a very strange movie. It has some hilarious bits in it. Overall, it's probably not the most successful, but there's some moments in there for sure.
So, like, probably my favorite out of the I guess the initial wave of his films, and I even like this one probably a little bit more than The Jerk, and that's I love The Lonely Guy. I think The Lonely Guy
Hmm.
is so underrated. I will say that as much as I like Steve Martin in it, it's really Charles Grodin that kind of makes the movie for me because anytime he does anything in that movie, I'm just dying. The scene where he's playing the robot, he's playing chess against the robot, is hysterical, and Grodin basically steals the whole movie from Steve Martin. But that out of the initial wave of his movies, that's my favorite. I love it.
That is a nuts film too.
Yeah,
That's the thing. Looking at this early career, I can't believe how weird his movies are.
they.
Do you know the
Oh
premise
man,
of The
yeah.
Lonely Guy, Al?
No, I don't even know what
Oh,
this is.
oh man. Chris, try to explain The Lonely Guy. This is such a weird thing.
Yeah, so Martin is a guy who writes greeting cards for a living, and he's living in New York City. And basically, he comes home, and his wife or girlfriend, I forget which one, is basically cheating on him, and tells him to get the hell out, take your stuff, beat it. And so he is now a lonely guy. He is one of New York's uh, loneliest men who unfortunately is on his own, is by himself, and he has to kind of maneuver New York City on his own as a lonely guy. And he has a lonely guy sidekick
It's
in Charles Grodin, who himself is a lonely guy who at one point talks about how he donated blood, and then they called him and said that they lost his blood, and he said that's basically all. That's one scene right there. Is they lost my blood, and
wait,
so
it's a comedy?
Yeah,
it's a
Like,
comedy.
yeah.
is
And
it
Like a
goofy
yes,
or is it
broad
like
comedy. It is.
yeah.
It is a very
Oh,
broad comedy.
oh yeah,
And
it's a
okay?
very absurdist comedy. Here. Okay, one of my favorite,
Because
one of the best
listening,
things.
the plot summary doesn't sound dissimilar to what I have heard about like Shop Girl, which is another movie I haven't seen.
well, he
But
is sort
Yeah,
of a weird, isolated, lonely man. Is the general
yeah.
vibe you get from Steve Martin?
Well,
But that's yeah.
here's an example of. I mean, it's a wildly funny to me. There's a bridge where it's very popular for fellow lonely guys to commit suicide from in the movie, and so there's there's a scene where Charles Grodin's character, I believe Warren, is has basically had enough, and he's going to finally jump off this bridge. And Steve Martin, he's his good friend, he's racing to try and stop him, but it's like the whole time he's running to the bridge, it's just random people jumping off the bridge. There's just all these guys just plummeting. It's that's basically the kind of humor. I mean, it's a movie that has, I think, really fallen off the radar. But
Yeah.
man, there is some there. I mean, if anybody who has any appreciation for either Martin or Charles Grodin has to see it, because it's I love that movie.
It's so weird, man. Charles Grodin is like his mentor in how to be a awkward, lonely person. It's
Yeah.
it's so
Well,
strange.
well, at one point, Charles Grodin he throws a dinner party, and he invites Steve Martin over and says, "Oh, I'm throwing a dinner party. It would be a good chance for you to meet some people." And Steve Martin's very excited, and he comes over to Charles Grodin's apartment, and there's no other people there. There's just cardboard cutouts of celebrities. And so there's a cardboard cutout of Dolly Parton. There's a cardboard cutout of Tom Selleck, and they're just kind of mingling around. And Grodin says, "Oh yeah, I got these at the Lonely Guy store over on Lexington. They had a great deal on these. They really liven the place up." And and then at one point, because Charles Grodin's playing the music too loud, so a couple cops come up, and they kind of say, "Hey," they bang on the doors, "Hey, you got to turn this music, you're having too crazy a party." And then they open the door and they see these cutouts, and they look very puzzled as to what the hell's going on. Why are these guys in this apartment with all these cutouts? And but they eventually leave. But one of the cops comes back and knocks on the door, and he says, I'm a lonely cop. Where did you get all these cutouts? I've got to have some of these cutouts. And they say, oh, you go to the Lonely Guy store over on Lexington. And he's all, do they have Gene Hackman? and Charles Grodin's all, they
That's
do.
a perfect pull.
They do, but you have to order him a week in advance.
Yeah, there's a surprising amount of mythology in the Lonely Guy.
Yeah.
Very.
So they never actually take us to the Lonely Guy store?
No, we don't
No.
actually go to the Lonely Guy store. It's
Okay.
that's not.
So it's not like the news report about the nuclear power plant at the beginning of the action movie where it's like, oh, that's
No.
going to be where the
It's
final
it's
shootout
world
takes
building.
place.
It's world building now.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's spreading
Yeah,
out the canvas.
I will say that I think the movie loses a little steam because like in the third act, basically Steve Martin has. I'm not going to give everything away, but Steve Martin writes a book of kind of like the guide to being a lonely guy, and so he sort of becomes a success because he wrote this book, and that's kind of the weaker part of the film because there's less. To me, I guess I find it weaker because it's less Charles Grodin. I really could have just seen scenes between Martin and Charles Grodin basically the whole movie, and that would have been fine by me. But overall, that's my favorite of that his sort of initial wave of films.
Is that still Reiner? I think that's the last Reiner.
No, that's Arthur Hiller.
Man with Two Brains was the last Miller.
That's
last
right.
Reiner. Okay,
That's
yeah.
right. Yeah.
All right. Well,
It sounds kind of interesting on account of like being almost a proto incel type thing.
Very much. Very much.
Yeah.
You know, people who make their sort of isolation or, you know, quote unquote failure in the broader social setting like the core of their identity. And then
it's exactly what it is. It's actually probably
you have
ripe
incentive to remain
rediscovery.
lonely if you are the lonely guy. If that's all that you are.
Another thing that's funny about it is, you know, one of the things when the pandemic started, one of the kind of the rabbit holes that I started to go down was watching like really old Siskel and Ebert episodes.
I did that too. Yeah.
Yeah. and I watched the one where they review The Lonely Guy. It's like 1984. And it's funny because, you know, basically, you know, Siskel, he likes it. Ebert does not. And in the whole reason that Ebert doesn't is he finds Steve Martin creepy. And he spends the whole review talking about this is not a pleasant actor to watch. I find him very creepy. And it's just funny because, you know, obviously within a few years, you know, Steve Martin is one of the most, you know, recognizable mainstream, you know, actors of that era. But at this point, he's just kind of at least to Ebert, he's just an annoying guy who's not very funny and creeps him out.
Well, he becomes father of the bride, right? Where, like the whole
Yeah.
like premise is that he's the most sort of down the middle milquetoast.
Oh yeah, I mean
dad.
he did a lot of
Like-
those kind of movies. I mean, yeah,
He did. And the weird thing is though, like the first decade or more of his career is weird, guys. It's very strange that he transitions into those. And we'll get to that thing in a moment because it's a big sea change. But yeah, like he's playing mad scientists and black and white noir detectives and lonely guys and Three Amigos and Cyrano de Bergerac. It's the strangest bunching of roles for a major star. Like, you know, I guess Jim Carrey kind of had similar oddities to him, but he was always kind of Jim Carrey, even when he's the cable guy. These are all real performances. Like he is all over the map in this first chunk of his career, and he has this incredible run, which I think starts right now, actually, after The Lonely Guy, or maybe you include Lonely Guy, with All of Me, and then he just goes. All of Me is an incredible performance. It is one of the best physical comedy performances of all time, in my opinion, and another very strange premise. Are you familiar with this one at all, Al?
Not at all.
Okay, let me try to do this justice quickly. He plays a lawyer who ends up. He represents Lily Tomlin, who is a rich woman dying of some undefined disease, and so she is administering her will, which involves her placing her soul into a younger woman's body through Indian magic, and through comic mishap and shenanigans, her soul ends up in Steve Martin's body, or in half of Steve Martin's body. So she has control of one side of his body, and he has control of the other half. And it is Steve Martin playing two characters inhabiting the same body all the way through. It's a lot of funny walks, a lot of really
that's the whole reason to watch it, is just to see Steve Martin walk very funny and stumble about. And the plot, it could have been it might as well have been like a Three Stooges short from from back in the day, because it means nothing, and there's all kinds of absurd stuff going on that really makes zero sense, and it doesn't matter. The only aspects of the movie that work is just Steve Martin as a showcase for his physical comedy.
He's
on that
wonderful.
level,
He's so good in this movie.
On that
really
level, it's a great performance, and it's worth seeing just for that. Everything else, forget about. It means nothing. It's just a showcase.
It sounds like a recurring Saturday Night Live sketch.
I mean,
like,
it
it's
feels
like
that.
Unfrozen Caveman Lawyer as a premise. Like,
you know what it feels like to me? It feels like an 80s comic adventure, which is what it is. Something like Vice Versa, like it's like, oh no, there's magic and we have to. I mean, I guess it is kind of the same plot in a way.
Yeah, I mean, there's
this body swapping stuff.
And it's a lot like, a less sci-fi take on Inner Space. I mean, it's, Inner Space is mostly a lot of Martin Short kind of, screwing about, but there's way better effects and a lot more going on that level. There's really no effects in All of Me. The effect is Steve Martin.
Yeah. It's high premise, very SNL kind of premise, but elevated by him.
Yeah.
And then after that, he makes Three Amigos. And I think, can we all agree on that one? I mean, that one's superlative, right? It's just an incredible comedy.
I mean, I'm tempted to say he might be my least favorite Amigo, but
he is the glue. I think he's the one that holds it together. He's the Leonardo of them,
Yes. Well, I think the only reason why I was starting to say it might be my least favorite is because he's sort of saddled with the romantic subplot that.
Sort of. I
mean, it's barely even that. I don't know. And you get just the wonderful delivery of after he delivers the line of about I'll fill you so full that you'll be using your dick for a pencil. And then I said, what does that mean? He goes, I don't know. So still like peacocking. That stayed with me for decades.
I feel like they didn't give him as many gags as they give Martin Short and Chevy Chase. Like he kind of is the third Amigo. Like, I mean, maybe Martin Short he's just trying really hard because it was kind of his first movie, and so at least to me, he's the one I always kind of notice because he's really going for it in that movie. Whereas Martin, not quite as much. I mean, and Chase, I guess.
I think it's more like John said. It's the sort of Leonardo thing, just like at a script level that somebody has to be the on the relative scale, the straight man.
Yeah.
And he did that straw.
He's doing
wasn't going to be Martin Short.
He's doing some shit in that movie, though. I mean,
he is.
The bird calls. Look up here! Look up here! There's a more physical comedy things for him to do. The scene in the jail cell with the chain machine. I always remember these bits from him. And just line deliveries that he gives. We need real money, Amigo money. Stuff like that. It's and My Little Buttercup. Although, to be fair, I mean, the person who really steals that film is El Guapo. He's the main guy in there for me. That's a great comic performance.
Yes, it is.
But the whole thing, I mean, I don't know how many times I've seen Three Amigos. More than 12, though.
Wow.
For sure.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. This was on TV all the time. And
it was another one.
Yeah, it may be another one that I've never actually sat down and watched start to finish, but I've definitely seen every scene in it 5 times, through that process.
Well,
it was the movie that sure got Lorne Michaels back to Saturday Night Live. That much I know.
I mean, it's not actually an SNL movie, but man, does it feel like one, right?
Yeah. I mean, it may as well be.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing those characters never appeared on the show. Maybe they did after the movie came out. Who knows? I mean, I probably couldn't wrangle Chase for that, but yeah, it feels like
he may still not have been welcome in those halls at that point.
Well, but to me, Chase has. I mean, they're all involved in the bit, but Chase has the best moment with the canteen in that movie.
Yeah.
That's the funniest part of that movie. Is first Martin Short taking basically just a bunch of sand falling into his mouth, and then with Chase, just he's got basically an endless stream of beautiful water dripping all over him, and then he's gargling with it and spitting it out. I mean, that's my favorite part of that flick.
I love when he throws it and is just running out into the sand behind. Yeah,
Yeah.
No, it's a great classic comedy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that movie has a lot of, I don't know, classic kind of vaudeville-esque bits in it. Like little, like things that feel like they would be performed by a comedy team on stage in it, as well as I think a pretty effective, like sitcom-y 80s style plot. But it's blown out. It has this has scale to it.
I don't think a lot of like sitcoms were doing full blown like Seven Samurai riffs.
Well, they basically they basically took the whole idea and made Galaxy Quest from it. I mean, that's
right. It's the same plot. Yes,
it's the same exact plot as Three Amigos.
Turns out
that's true.
Really good plot.
It's the sci-fi version instead of the Western version.
Yeah.
It's good. I mean, there's no shame in it. It's good.
Is there I'm trying to think now? Is there like a fantasy version of that too? Is there?
There should be. It seems like one that would write itself.
Is that what like Martin Lawrence's Black Knight was about? I don't know.
That's a dire one.
I mean, Tropic Thunder kind of covers somewhat the same thing too.
Yeah.
And A Bug's Life has the same plot too.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. Three Amigos. Who knew how revolutionary it would be?
Yeah, I mean, it's the fake out Seven Samurai plot. That might be the first time anyone did that.
Well, and it's the version of that where it's like Hollywood people get mistaken for the real thing and so get roped into that, which is how the Galaxy Quest and Tropic Thunder, like when you put it like that, it's like, okay, of course Hollywood loves to make that movie over and over again. Now
there's a premise. This is not a movie that exists, but there was a premise that was floating around to do the fantasy version of this that I remember, which was the Knights of the Round Table get called into the modern age by some sort of magic fantasy thing, and all the knights are like actors and musicians and things, people who've been knighted. So it's all like like Paul McCartney and shit like that. Called upon to save England.
So it's modern day knights.
Yes,
get
exactly.
Back into, okay, not the original knights. No. Or you could swap places, maybe.
Yeah.
Do a parallel storyline.
Put Sir Patrick Stewart in Middle Ages, sure.
Yeah, and Ben Kingsley back there.
Yeah, that should get made someday. Anyway, same year as Three Amigos is Little Shop of Horrors, which I don't think you've seen either, Al, but man, he's good in it. Man,
yeah, he's great. And oh yeah, I mean, you get to see him and Bill Murray together. That's. I mean, obviously you saw them together on Saturday Night Live, but at least in terms of a film, that's a great.
I think that's the only time. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think so, which is kind of strange to think about, because that was kind of the thing back then, was you'd always have these two-hand comedies that was like all over the place. But yeah, that other than that scene, they never did anything else together on film. But yeah, that's a great one.
Yeah, wonderful movie, and well worth seeing. Al, you got to do it so we can talk about your first time seeing Little Shop. It's another surprising one and a weird premise, and pretty dark actually, and all of those things. Yeah, it's
I mean, I've heard that the original ending of it is basically the end of the world, and there's a happier ending, but it still seems like it's sort of a horror musical, right?
Yeah, I mean, in sort of a comedy, tongue-in-cheek kind of way, but I mean, the events are horror, but they're just kind of done with a. Well, it's the guy who wrote the music, Alan Menken and Howard Ashman, the guy who did like Little Mermaid and Aladdin music, doing a 50s horror movie, basically. And it's like the best version you can imagine of that, I guess. It has kind of been running it has been running eternally in New York ever since. New production comes up every time one goes down, a new one shows up. It's running currently in New York, and it runs regionally. My high school theater did it. Many high school theaters, and it's all down to, well, I mean, it's a very good show, but that movie had cultural ubiquity in the '80s.
Yeah.
I feel
They
like,
even they even did a 2-part episode of Head of the Class
oh
where
God, I
the
remember this.
class
Yes,
performs Little Shop of Horrors. Yes.
and it really is just them performing the show. It's not
Pretty
like
much,
they,
yeah. Yeah.
it's
Oh
like
yeah.
the whole thing stops so they can just perform Little Shop of Horrors for an episode.
Yeah. Yep. It's that shows you the impact that Little Shop of Horrors had on the mid '80s. It was a big deal.
Yeah, I know that's a big gap in my filmography. That it's one though I've seen bits of it. Like I feel enough familiarity with it that I haven't felt like the need where I'm like, okay, I've got to like go get caught up on this. I'm like, I've got a little over half of this colored in my head already. So it doesn't feel as urgent as something that is like a full blown gap.
Well, at the very least, YouTube the Steve Martin Bill Murray scene.
And his dentist song is very
At
good.
the very least.
It's his whole performance in it. He has about a half hour in the middle of the film, basically, and it's probably the best part of the movie. He's wonderful in these scenes.
Oh,
He
yeah.
is he's sort of an Elvis-inspired greaser dentist.
Yes,
It's so good. It's so
Mhm.
fun and clever, and yeah, he's absolutely engaged. This is kind of the last time. Well, no, you got Ruprecht, the monkey boy, coming up, but uh, but he's starting to not do this as much anymore. This kind of extreme characterization. So it's
Yeah, he after
and
this,
he's so good at it.
he's definitely headed into the more mainstream kind of the 4 quadrant type
Yeah.
movies that are, I would say up until this point, probably most of the movies, are kind of aimed at maybe younger guys, and now he's kind of getting into the okay, we if we really want to raise our rate here, we gotta get everybody in the theater, and so I feel like after Little Shop is where goes into that direction, and not in a bad way, because to me his best movies are in this run, so it's no knock on him at all.
Well, I mean, the next year, 1987, is
Yeah.
2 films, Roxanne and Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Now,
Yeah.
Roxanne is very good. It was a really big
Yes.
deal at the time.
Mhm.
It's the Cyrano de Bergerac story, modern update.
Mhm.
He does a good job of it. It's kind of the first like real leading man romance thing that he ever tackles, and people like it a lot. It's a funny movie. I don't know that it holds up great now. It's charming enough, but I wouldn't seek out Roxanne.
I
Still
say
pretty good. Yeah.
it holds up as well as any other movie where Rick Rossovich has a major role. That's what I like to say.
I don't know if it's Top Gun, but it's it's a good
Yeah,
movie.
it's funny. It's like, I think people kind of think, oh, it's the one where he's got the big nose, and oh, isn't that? But it's a very sweet movie. I mean, it's
Yeah.
it's funny, it's pleasant, it's kind of a change of pace, at least at this point for Martin. Even though he's got a huge nose, it's really a pretty grounded movie. And it's just a lot. It's a romantic comedy, and it's a funny one, and that's perfectly fine. And it's I think my favorite bit is because it's all a play on Cyrano, and my favorite part in that movie is where Rick Rossovich is talking to Daryl Hannah, and he's got like this absurd like mud flap hat on because he's trying to hide the microphone that where Steve Martin is telling him what to say. And so Steve Martin's telling him all these things to say to Daryl Hannah to try and woo her, but they're firefighters, and so at some point, the radio, the firefighter radio comes on. Is like, we need 2 engines at Third and Smith Street. And so then Rossovich is like, yeah, we need 3 engines at Third and Smith Street. And it just kind of cuts to Steve Martin trying to bang on the firefighter mic radio, trying to turn it off. It's a sweet movie, and that's what I'll say about it. It's not one I've seen in lately, but I always kind of liked it, and it really was, I think, the first attempt by Martin to kind of be a real mainstream actor.
Yeah, it's
I
he wrote it too. It's very much like
Yeah.
his baby and his creative
I saw
gem.
some of that when I was a kid on TV, and I think for many years, it took me a long time to realize that Roxanne and L.A. Story were not the same movie. Um,
I mean, he's got the
I
nose in the one. It's-
I think that I saw some like L.A. Story later, and then it felt like the vibe of that was like, this has to be the movie where he wears the big prosthetic nose. Like that, the prosthetic nose would be more at home in this like weirder movie than Roxanne was more grounded, like you said. Um, and isn't there also a thing in LA Story where like there's like a billboard behind him
Yeah,
that's
it's a
sort of like
freeway
Cyrano de
sign.
Bergeracing him while he's talking to
Oh, yeah.
a
There's like
woman?
Very
the
much.
freeway sign that kind of gives him some advice here and there. Kind
So
of
there's a Cyrano type thing going on there
there
too.
is,
Okay.
A
yeah,
little
I
bit,
was,
yeah,
yes. Both
yeah,
are things
okay.
he wrote.
Well, it was
Yeah.
enough to confuse like 11-year-old me.
yeah. It's that is true. There are definitely similarities.
LA Story is a big
I
one.
think at some point I thought
Yes.
that maybe later in that movie he like gets his nose worked on, and then he's the guy getting it. He's the handsome guy getting advice from the
I mean, that is a
magic
movie with
sign or-
like plastic surgery jokes in it, so it could
Oh
be.
yes, yeah.
That's like 3 years away though, and he has some incredible films in between, like Planes,
Well,
Trains,
we're-
and Automobiles.
Yeah, which that's definitely number one for me. That's
Yeah.
probably that very good chance that that's the movie I've seen the most in my life, just because I really try to
It's a
make
good
a
one.
point to watch it once a year, and that's the one for me. I mean, it's to me it's the best Steve Martin movie, the best John Candy movie, the best John Hughes movie. It's like any way you slice it, that's just the best one. And I know some people they take issue with how schmaltzy it gets at the end. Doesn't bother me one bit. I think they earn it, and God, I genuinely love that movie.
One of the great movies, one of the all timers. I think it's kind of covers all the bases of what you would want in a movie to watch with your family at Thanksgiving or
Yeah.
Christmas or whatever. It's a kind of perfect in its way, and just a masterpiece of a screenplay. Great pairing. I mean, Steve Martin is an incredible scene partner in these comedies. You do like a two-hander with Steve Martin, and you're almost always going to get the best out of the other person as well. He's about to do it again with Michael Caine. He's
Both times.
over and over. He's just a great screen partner for comedy.
Is Planes and Trains the like crossover moment for him, like sort of proving that he can exist in the real world? Like it's still comedies, but not the absurdist dead men don't wear plaid.
Yeah, I think it's sort of the first time that he's sort of the middle-aged dad kind of
It's
guy.
the first time he plays stick up the ass.
Yeah,
Which,
because
he will go back to that well many times.
Yeah, I mean he's the straight man. He's it's Candy who's kind of the obnoxious lout who's spilling beer in the bed and leaving his underwear in the sink and all that kind of stuff. And so Martin's kind of has the though. With that being said, one of the best moments in the movie is him going to the rental car counter and, hurling about, 30 F-bombs in about 2 minutes. And it's the only reason that the movie's rated R. And I love that about it, that they said, this scene is too good, because the rest of the movie, there's none of that. There's no obscene
no
language
F-bombs.
virtually.
Yeah.
No, there's none. It could have been probably a PG film without that scene, but they someone made the decision, I guess John Hughes, that no, this scene is too good to not have in this movie. We're keeping it, and we'll keep the R rating, and that's just fine by us.
That would never happen today. I mean, that
Never.
would just be we're just going to cut the scene and release it as a PG.
It would be so easy.
Like, well, yeah, it's like no, it'll go on the unrated cut on Blu-ray or whatever. Like,
yeah.
It's if you cut that scene out of that movie, and then after you'd seen the film, saw that scene later, that would be so weird. That would be so like, what is this? This doesn't feel at all like Planes, Trains, and Automobiles.
No,
Somehow
and
it's the perfect piece, though.
Oh, and and what the actress from who's also in Ferris Bueller, I think Edie
Yeah,
McClure.
Edie McClure.
She's great. Oh, she is great in that too. She is just perfect in that scene, and then she has the great kind of the capper with her f bomb at the very end of it. Oh God, it's a great moment, great movie, and I could go on and on about that one because it's just been one of those movies that I never ever get tired of. I laugh just as hard now as the first time seeing it, and man, it just it's a total bullseye. I mean, you can go back, and I would do it myself. You can go back to pretty much all of John Hughes's movies and say, that wasn't that great, and Breakfast Club, I don't know, do I really need that? But man, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, it was total comedic domination.
Yeah, and it makes you cry too. An amazing movie.
Yeah.
It's so good, and yeah, I thank God. I guess they have remade that a few times. I was about to
There
say,
was
thank
that
God they
due
never remade
date.
that.
Well,
Like,
there
That's
was
the
yeah.
explicit one.
Was that Galifianakis
Yeah.
and Robert Downey
Downey
Jr.
Mm-hmm.
There
Yeah.
was
There's one, Ice Cube hasn't he done that?
well there was a lot of talk, and I don't know if it's still in the planning stages, that they were going to do it with Will Smith and Kevin Hart, that they were going to do an actual full on remake of it.
I don't really like that.
I might like it if they didn't do the obvious and they would put Kevin Hart in the Steve Martin role and Will Smith in the John Candy role. Maybe then it would be kind of interesting, but I doubt that they would do that.
I mean,
there.
but can you, like, Uber exists now? Like,
I know it's like none of these. It's so a lot of the movie could be solved.
You don't get stuck with somebody.
No, it doesn't really happen. But thank God those things were possible in the late '80s.
Yeah.
Well, we're still like the mid to late '80s. Like we got to hustle up.
Yeah,
We're not even.
They're so good though. There's so many good. The next one is Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. What do you want, man? I mean, that one's great too. It's incredible.
That's my number 2 for him.
It's good.
Yes, God, him. I mean, as great as he is with John Candy, he's just as good with Michael Caine. I mean, they are so much fun together, and
they really click. Yeah,
they really do. Whoever came up with that casting was that was a stroke of genius, because it's like you don't really think. I mean, maybe now. I mean, God, he's been in like 2,000 movies, but it's like you don't really think of Michael Caine as like a truly hilarious actor. But man, he completely matches Martin. Oh God, the sequence with Martin in the wheelchair, where he's where Caine is pretending to be the world famous psychiatrist who's going to get Steve Martin to walk again, and oh man, where he's hitting him on the legs. I mean that's his funniest scene.
Meal, yeah.
Oh my
great.
God, I mean, to me, both of these movies, Planes, Trains, and Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. I mean, man, what a twofer.
Yeah, and he's on fire here creatively. It's such a different character and such a different performance from Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. This is all his weirdo stuff that he can throw in this. They play assholes too. That's my favorite thing about this movie is that they're such assholes, and the movie kind of just rolls with it and is like, well, the person they were screwing, turns out she's an asshole too. And it's a brilliant screenplay. It's a perfect screenplay in a lot of ways. I love this movie. It's so good. And
it's like, I mean, it's obviously it's easy for me to say now because I've probably seen it at least like 3 or 4 times, but it's not hard to figure out where it's going. It's like the kind of the twist in the movie, but who cares? It's just everyone's so good in it. It doesn't matter. It's just.
I was pretty shocked when I was 8. I tell you what.
Yeah, I'm sure it got me, whenever I first saw it, but it's like, it's always easier once you've seen the movie to tell these twists. But it doesn't matter. It's so funny. The Ruprecht stuff is
legendary.
That's definitely going back to the earlier Steve Martin films, and thank God they did that, because I mean there's so much Mother, not Mother.
I saw the Broadway musical version of this. some time back with Lithgow in the Michael Caine
Oh.
role, and it worked.
Oh,
It worked
yeah.
pretty good. It's a pretty indestructible screenplay story thing to adapt.
Yeah.
I never saw the Marlon Brando one. Should get around to that one time.
Well, now have you seen the Anne Hathaway version?
No, I never went for that one. I heard it did
Yeah,
not work.
No, neither did I. No.
Seemed like she'd be good for the role. I was less enthused with Rebel Wilson, but
Does it?
Yeah, it did. By all accounts, it didn't work at all. Okay, but like you say, Al, we have.
I don't know if Anne Hathaway has scoundrel energy to me.
She could be a posh criminal.
Yeah, I suppose if she's maybe she's the Kane. Yeah, I haven't seen that one.
She's the
and obviously Rebel Wilson would be the lower status one.
I'm not even 100% sure which one is playing which part. I don't.
Hathaway's the Kane. Hathaway is
She's the Kane.
Yeah, it's got to be that. Yeah,
these days I don't know.
that she's the upper crust one.
Well, we
I don't
can
know.
speculate on that.
They would have been better off with Rose Byrne.
Yes, they would have actually. She's good. All right, next year Steve Martin does Parenthood. The first time he plays like a warm family role. It's a Ron Howard movie. It's pretty good. It's a little more blue than you remember. I think it's got dildo jokes and stuff in there, but it is kind of him figuring out a thing that will make him a lot of money for the next 20 years. And
this to me is the best of his. The family, the best of his what I'll call kind of his sitcom movies, where these.
I agree.
I think it's great.
Yeah.
There's a lot, all the stuff with him at the Little League game, and Clint Howard is pestering his kid out in the outfield. That's hysterical. There's a lot of funny stuff in Parenthood, and even when they
better
get
Ron Howards. Yeah.
Oh, I agree. And even when they get to even the more dramatic stuff, it works. Like, maybe I'm admitting too much, but when it gets to the end of that movie and Jason Robards is telling Tom Hulce's son, do you want to come live here? Hey, that gets to me. Yes, that's right. Little cool.
The cast in this is nuts. Yeah,
it's schmaltzy, but I don't care, and I think Keanu Reeves is good in it. I mean, there's a lot of
Joaquin
people
Phoenix.
Oh,
right,
that's
yeah,
right.
Baby Joaquin.
Known then as Leaf.
Yeah,
at that point,
that's right.
He was
Leaf
Phoenix.
Keanu's got that scene when he's talking about you've seen this one, right? Everyone saw Parenthood. I mean, this guy played on TV in the '90s so much.
Yeah, it's another one of those that I've seen a bunch of parts of it on TV.
Man, little dude got his first boner this week. Yeah.
My Blue Heaven and this and Father of the Bride. It's all stuff that I've seen bits and pieces throughout my life on TV, but
My Blue Heaven is
maybe
next.
conflating some.
And I gotta talk about My Blue Heaven. I'm sorry. We're getting through it. We're about to hit the wilderness years for him. So we're still in the good ones. My Blue Heaven. Do you know what the deal with that movie is, Al? You know anything about that other than what you've seen little bits of?
Oh, not real. I mean, I know that it's he's in the witness protection program, and Rick Moranis is his FBI handler.
Came out in 1990, same year as Goodfellas, and it was written.
Oh yeah, so it's the comedy version of Goodfellas. So
it's really the comedy. It is written by Nora Ephron, and Nora Ephron.
It's the comedy sequel to Goodfellas, right? Yeah. Okay.
And it's actually quite literally that in a lot of ways, because Nora Ephron was married to Nicholas Pileggi, who is the guy who wrote Wise Guy, meaning she spent years, with him while he was researching that book with Henry Hill. So this is entirely a comedy about Henry Hill in witness protection. It is functionally a sequel to Goodfellas. Well, it's it's nothing like that movie, but it is 100%.
It's the same source material.
It is the same source material.
Sequel.
Yes, it makes a good double bill, and he's great in it. It is the kind of performance. I don't think he ever does this performance again. This sort of thing. A cartoon Guido, basically. It is. He's
so
playing
over the top.
It's a version of Silvio Dante by Steve Martin or something. It's so weird and so excessive and so effective. He's really funny in this movie. It is just a dominant performance. It just rolls over everyone else in it. And there's some good, Rick Moranis, Joan Cusack. It's a good cast and it's a good script, but man, it's this huge Steve Martin performance at the center of it, and it's just pure energy. And
Yeah,
it's
all
really fun.
the scenes with him in the supermarket, those are the ones that always come to mind for me when he's first in the town and he goes in the supermarket and just all the crazy stuff going on there. It's because he's been a mobster his whole life. He has no idea about buying groceries or what goes on at a supermarket. And yeah, that's really where he gets to shine is are those kind of scenes in that movie.
Yeah, that's a strange film, kind of forgotten by time. I feel like I've seen this
Yeah.
movie 25 times. It's one of my
Oh wow.
favorites. Yeah, uh-huh.
I do feel like
It's
it was a big movie like back in the day and like on TV, you're right?
a lot of Comedy Central.
I
Yeah,
feel like it used to get rerun a lot and has kind of disappeared in the streaming era.
sadly. I mean, you would think. I mean, Goodfellas certainly hasn't. You would think there would be some sort of
Right.
carryover there, just in the fact that they're joined. They're so specifically joined, and I don't know. I think it's ready for a new audience as people come to it. It's great. Okay, we're getting to the turning point here. We are going from it's becoming he's about to stop doing his weird movies and start doing Father of the Brides, because 1991 is the year of Father of the Bride and of L.A. Story, which I don't know. It feels like this is kind of a crucial juncture because it could be
Yeah.
one or the other path. L.A. Story is this very personal, very articulate kind of. It's a romantic comedy, but and the romantic comedy stuff kind of works just in that it feels very Steve Martin. But what it really is kind of it feels like a personal expression of who he is as an artist. There's a big plot line in it. Is he plays a wacky weatherman on TV where he puts on like a stupid hat and does a lot of big energy, like, "Hey, it's the time of the weather. Look how silly it's sun," and and it's a big goofy performance, and he hates doing it.
Yeah.
What he really wants to do is go to art museums and ride around on roller skates and make sort of little dry bon mots about the state of things in Los Angeles and in his love life and what relationships are like and how weird it is to date people 20 years younger than him. It feels like a very pure Steve Martin personal expression. And it got comparisons.
Well,
to
it feels like it's him doing a Woody Allen movie.
It is
Pretty
very
much.
much like a
Yeah.
Woody Allen movie set in LA, and it has that kind of shared identity that New York has with Woody Allen films, except for LA. And it really feels like this could be a path for him. It's such a personal film, and it's an effective film.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I said that I think like with sort of as my tone was like that it was a dig, but I think I mean that as a compliment.
oh, totally.
In that it's like a good Woody Allen movie.
Yes.
It's almost like if you're remaking Annie Hall in Los Angeles, it's got, I guess, a little more absurdism mixed in than Annie Hall. Though I mean, obviously Annie Hall does a lot of weird structural,
I like
fourth
the
wall breaking things. Even
I like the absurdist stuff much more than the romantic parts of this movie. Like I kind of feel like that was sort of thrown together. It doesn't work quite as well when it's more spoofing life in LA. That's the stuff I like. The scene where he's trying to prove his worth to eat at a certain restaurant. He has to provide like a financial statement and has to go to the bank to basically justify that he's able to eat in a particular elite restaurant, which is owned, managed, whatever, by a Patrick Stewart. He has a great scene there. As
You think with a financial statement like this, you can have the duck? Yeah.
yeah. So I like that, and there's the bit where they're kind of spoofing the freeway shootings. That's a very funny part in that one. So those are the parts that are more with me about that movie. When it gets kind of into the the romantic subplot of it, and am I a better fit with Sarah Jessica Parker or the actual woman who's more of a match for me, who I guess that was his actual ex-wife, right? It's not as
Victoria
strong for me.
Tennant.
Yeah.
I like all that stuff. I like the Sarah Jessica Parker stuff, the Richard E. Grant stuff. It has a lot. I've also seen this film a number of times. It has a lot of unique kind of energy, observations that don't tend to get trotted out in Hollywood comedies. Like they don't make movies like this after Woody Allen gets kind of
yeah.
He's
Well,
he
and
was like the only
and
one.
Steve,
yeah.
Steve Martin doesn't really make movies like this afterwards, because he goes
No.
down the Father of the Bride path
Yep.
after this, goes more
Yeah.
mainstream. You call it a wasteland. What I found interesting about it, looking at this, like, he's obviously not the first comedian to make the transition into like dramatic acting, and this, even specifically, like, sort of, sad sack dramatic acting tends to be the thing that
They love it.
comedians gravitate towards.
Well, this same year that there's L.A. Story and Father of the Bride, he gives another really great performance in a middling movie in a Grand Canyon.
Yeah.
He's basically doing his version of playing Joel Silver, kind of this mega action movie producer who is kind of a victim of an act of violence, and what does that do to him? And I mean, the movie itself, I don't know, it's a little overwrought for me, but man, I thought he's the best part of Grand Canyon.
I agree. Yeah, he's not in it very much, but it's
No.
certainly interesting. I always find him very interesting in dramatic roles. Well, less so now, I guess. Now that he's done more of them, it's less of a thing to see. I don't know, to see him appear in Billy Lynn's Long Halftime Walk. The thrill is gone by that point. But back in the day, back when you would see him show up in things like this, or of course Spanish Prisoner being the big one, that it was great. It was really awesome. Because it was few and far between, but he always kind of seemed to have that aspiration, and he also always has, like, kind of from now on, this sadness to him. He's got this sort of melancholy, and I figure it was always there, but it really comes out, right around here, in stuff like Grand Canyon, and he's just done being the wild and crazy guy. I mean, anytime he even tries to do that anymore, I mean, I think there's one exception, Bowfinger, and the rest is just it feels like your heart is not in this. Because
it feels to me. What's interesting to me that, as we've seen other, like, later comedic actors make that transition into more dramas, they seem to take a more direct route, like, say, Jim Carrey or Bill Murray. When they go dramatic, they kind of make the big leap straight into, like I said, indie sad sack drama roles, whereas Martin transitioned more slowly over time from, like, the absurdist Saturday Night Live stuff, and then the Three Amigos broad spoof things, or the Man with Two Brains, into, like, more earthbound, like, mainstream comedies, like I guess Planes, Trains would be in that mold, or Parenthood.
He's trying stuff out there, but it becomes overwhelming.
Started playing the dad in those family comedies before he got into going full sad bastard. Whereas Bill Murray just turned that corner and never really looked back. Or Jim Carrey went straight for like, I don't want to just want to make a more serious role. I want an Oscar this time.
Oh yeah, he was going hard
for the Truman Show. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even the Truman Show's barely it's still a comedy, basically. But I don't know. I mean,
but it's one of the more pretentious comedies out there.
It was,
it's pretty sure it's saying something trenchant about the state of culture.
I think it kind of is, accidentally almost.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking that, like, actually, it probably did have its fingers on that. I don't know. Like, I haven't seen that one in a while, but it's a little more grandiose in its ambitions than, I don't know, Lost in Translation, or probably Shop Girl.
Between Truman Show and Man on the Moon, you can definitely see it's Carrey. I am an actor. Please acknowledge me for being an actor.
Right.
What was the one that he was, like, a theater owner?
The Majestic.
Yeah.
The Majestic, right? That seemed like it was just a petition to the Academy. It was like,
well, that was almost
give me a goddamn trophy.
Yeah, that was almost like,
I'll do anything.
I want to be Tom Hanks. Acknowledge me for being Tom Hanks. Was
right.
The Majestic kind of? That's how I looked at that one.
I can see why he thought he had a shot at that. And if he didn't, that's fine. But he was of such cultural just a monster in the 90s. He was just so huge. Yeah. And obviously he couldn't do what he was doing forever. So I get that move. And the fact that it didn't work out is why he's in Sonic the Hedgehog movies now. But
well, I mean, it did kind of work out. He eventually,
he's not Tom Hanks.
Eternal Sunshine is fantastic.
Yes, I mean, that's a great film. Probably the least successful.
And he's great in it.
financially at least.
And I think even like Man on the Moon may not be a super popular movie, but people recognize him as giving a great performance there.
He's good in all these movies. He's probably good in The Majestic. I'd have to check it out again, but I bet he's good in it. Yeah.
He's not good in number 23.
No, he's not.
No, I don't know if it's just because Steve Martin never had quite the level of cultural like ubiquity that Jim Carrey did in the late '90s, where like Jim Carrey could take the biggest swing possible, or if Martin's just ambitions or confidence were a little lower, at least confidence about doing this more dramatic thing. Obviously, he's a very assured comedic performer.
Well, he does seem to resent, the stupid stuff, I guess, that he was so good at. I mean, I don't know. I think from these movies we've talked about, he probably deserved an Oscar nomination or attention for, just by virtue of being one of the best comedic performers out there. And again, we've done a whole podcast on this. That's the genre that the Oscars respect the least. But yeah, like his dramatic work, I don't know, maybe you could make the argument that Spanish Prisoner is excellent, but like it's just it's not his thing to be great at. Like he's interesting at it, but like he's not. I wouldn't call him an exceptional actor, or maybe he's just too big of a star to get lost in a role in that way. And that we have such a relationship with him as a comedian. I don't know. It's hard to say. I don't think it ever quite landed as like great actor Steve Martin. But
how much of a factor do you think it is just that he had this very distinctive like head of silver hair from the time he was a young man?
It's something.
I think that helped.
Probably made him like a little harder for him to disappear into a role, as quote unquote serious role, where like he's just so physically recognizable.
It was kind of a trademark for him. I mean, anything when you're kind of
double-edged sword,
movies, maybe right, that sort of sets you apart. It's like because it's funny you bring that up now because we're kind of getting into a run of movies where he ditches the silver hair and they're just not, and nobody wanted to see that. Leap of Faith, which is kind of
he does 3 in a row with dyed hair. He does Leap of Faith, Simple Twist of Fate, and Mixed Nuts with dyed hair, and it's like, what are you doing, dude?
Yeah, like Leap of Faith is kind of an interesting one. But I can see why it bombed because they totally sold it as like, oh, this is kind of a big Steve Martin. He's a wacky kind of zany preacher, and it's going to be hilarious, and he's going to be, you're not going to be able to get enough of Steve Martin doing all the crazy preacher stuff. And then it's really not that. That's not really the movie at all. And
it's
so
a good idea. It doesn't land. Yeah.
No.
If that movie had hit, it would have changed his career, I think, but it didn't. But these are like the bad years. That's like he takes some big swings here. Simple Twist of Fate is that's him trying to recapture the Roxanne magic. It is a modern day adaptation of Silas Marner by George Eliot, a classic tale of adoption and death. And it's no one cares. No one wants to see that movie.
Weird that one didn't get.
Yeah. He makes stuff like House Sitters. He makes Father of the Bride Part 2, which people like, I guess. It sustains him, but like, and then he gets into Sergeant Bilko,
Well, but during this run is my least favorite movie that he's done, and that's Mixed Nuts.
It's a bad one.
Yeah. That is just, and there's like, there's a lot of funny people in it. I mean, Adam Sandler's in it, and it's got Gary Shandling as
Madeline Kahn is in it. Yeah.
But God, it is, and oh man, I don't know if you remember this, but Liev Schreiber plays a transvestite in the movie and has a big dance scene with Steve Martin in the movie, and man, it's a rough watch.
I do remember that. It's his first film role. Yeah.
Was that his first one? Well, you got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And yeah, that one is easily, I mean, you would think people working for a suicide prevention hotline would be ripe for comedy, but that movie proves that it is not at all ripe for comedy. That was the low point, in my opinion, for him.
Well, the thing is, there's a lot of low points. In
terms of,
I think the thing about suicide humor is that when you miss
at Christmas, by the way,
you get stranded in a pretty rough spot.
It's a Christmas
suicide hotline movie. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's a farce too. It's a farce. That's a bummer. That one. That's no good. And but that one is just like erased from existence. No one knows about Mixed Nuts. It's I mean, yeah. So he does Sergeant Bilko here, which he is cited as like that was when I that was the rock bottom for me. That's when I had to take stock of my career and change everything about myself. And then he makes Spanish Prisoner, and his famous anecdote on that is when he saw a screening of it. The first time he saw a screening of it, the audience laughed when he came on screen, and he was like, "Oh well, shit, I'm never going to have a serious career." And he got he got sad and melancholy, Steve Martin, about that for a while. And as a result, you get like shit like The Out of Towners. And
Yeah,
and
that one's bad.
my choice for absolute low point, Bringing Down the House.
Oh, forgot about that one.
Yeah, now we're getting to where I didn't see. Yeah, Bringing Down the House is nope. Yeah.
I don't know how you decide you're going to change your life after Sergeant Bilko and you go on to make Bringing Down the House and two Cheaper by the Dozen films. It's
Well, and I think
like
Bringing Down the House is just. It's basically just House Sitter with Queen Latifah instead of Goldie Hawn, isn't it? I mean,
basically
the
except
exact same.
there's no romance there because they're one different
Well.
races. Although I wish that movie was a straight up romance. Well, no, Eugene Levy has, I believe, hooks up with Queen Latifah in that, if I recall.
Man.
Right, you got me
Right.
straight tripping,
That
boo.
sounds
They
right.
sold it on that line,
Oh,
yeah, because
my God.
he starts to talk, with
Oh.
black vernacular, yeah, and oh god, that
man.
movie is
right.
humiliating for everyone involved. I can't even imagine watching
It
that
was
in
a
2022.
gigantic hit, though.
I-
A gigantic
Yeah.
hit.
I mean, that's the thing. Like all these
That's the
middle of the road.
It's humiliating for the audience too because it was a giant hit.
Like these things are empowered by being so much more successful than his weird stuff. Like I bet it made probably twice what Bowfinger made.
But we do have to give Bowfinger some credit because that's a few years earlier, and that to
Yeah.
me that's one of his best overall. That's almost kind of the end for him and Eddie Murphy. Like it's all. I mean, I know Eddie Murphy. That Dolomite movie was pretty good, but overall that was kind of it for both of them, and they kind of went out together. It made a great comedy together, hilarious movie, and that's kind of the it for both of them.
My recollection of that was that it was seen as sort of like a comeback for Eddie Murphy. Like, that Eddie Murphy had been doing his like version of Cheaper by the Dozen or whatever, or Bringing Down the House, and people were like, "Oh, this is Eddie Murphy, sort of like back in the saddle, doing good stuff."
That
again.
might have been that might have been how it was sold. But I'll say this: I mean, just real quick for Eddie Murphy, like a year before that, he did Life, and Life is a really underrated movie for Eddie Murphy. Like, not a lot of people bring up that one because I think they don't really know exactly what that movie is, but that movie is so much better than people give Life credit for. So
Wasn't
I'll
a hit,
just say
though.
that.
Yeah,
Not
and
a huge
it
hit.
certainly
No.
isn't. It certainly isn't like classic era Eddie Murphy. Like Bowfinger is.
No.
Like
Bowfinger
that's
is
him
really him. I mean, yeah, he is so great. I mean, he's great in both the roles, but man, especially as Jiff. Oh God, he is. Murphy is killing it there.
I mean, for both of them, for Martin and Murphy, that really is like a really nice return to form as they're in their senior years, kind of, after they've been in the wilderness for a while. Like to see them come back and really hit one out of the park is pretty great. It is kind of the last time it happens for both of them, I guess. I don't know. Is there one? I mean, the Dolomite movie is pretty good.
That's good. That's good. But I mean, I guess it's kind of just maybe an overall issue to bring up is like the whole notion of the comedic superstar actor is dead. Now anyway.
Well, there's
so
that, yeah.
I guess you're really only going to get these guys being funny in like a Netflix movie or a Hulu miniseries because nobody's making comedies anymore. Definitely not for the big screen. I mean, if you look at the box office right now, there's one comedy and it's not even a narrative film, and that's Jackass. I mean, they just don't make comedies.
That's true.
Well, I would say that the comedic superstar today is not a like comedian, not a stage comedian, but I mean, because they make action comedies today, So like Chris Pratt is the
Yeah.
comedic superstar today. It's people who have like some sitcom background, maybe.
That's weird. That's true. But yeah, straight comedies don't get made. They need some
No.
sort of hook, or they're not financially viable. They don't translate as well, I guess, is as part of it.
They go to streaming.
Right.
Yeah, because like Nutty Professor, that was a huge summer comedy, gigantic. Boom. This Cable Guy ultimately wasn't a big success, but it was a huge hyped summer June. Everyone must see the Cable Guy kind, and it's wild that's over. That is done. There's none of that.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
almost strange. Like,
Maybe
am I actually nostalgic for those, or do I just like remember that they used to have them and they don't now? Like, do I need more Bruce Almighty's? No, not really. I mean,
No,
if
I
they
don't
were
need
the good
that.
versions of them, sure.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Even The Mask is kind of like that feels more like a modern kind of superhero movie than a lot of these. Like, I actually don't have a lot of nostalgia for the big box studio comedy hits. Wedding Crashers and the like. I'm way more into these weird personal expressions like Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, or or even something like Three Amigos. Like, I mean, I guess Three Amigos is kind of in that mode. It feels so much.
yeah, but
less,
also it's 40 years old at this point. Like it's not.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
We're talking about things that they're making nowadays.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Three Amigos would be a 6 or 8 episode Netflix series where like some of the episodes are 19 minutes long and some of them are 42 minutes long.
And the first one is just them from one of their movies, their original movies, and it's I don't know if I'm so much nostalgic for that. It's just kind of interesting to me how that's just vanished. I mean, that was like pretty much every week. Even if it was just some Pauly Shore movie, there was a comedy that would come out. It could be, something
Right.
god awful. I mean, that was Touchstone Pictures. I mean, that was their whole thing was just let's make 30 dopey comedies a year. A sister act will break through and that'll be a big hit and it'll be all worth it just for that. But in the meantime, we're going to throw you, Celtic Pride and Holy Matrimony and all these other.
And they're not expensive to make, so a bunch of the other ones will break even
I'm
anyway.
sure it was they knew
Yeah.
that once they went to video, all of these would make money, except maybe Cabin Boy, but everything else would probably make money in the long run. And they just kind of they just hope one of them can be a gigantic hit. And so I just think it's interesting that entire aspect of cinema is gone.
I mean, it's all changing so fast, like we said, there's room for this on the streaming platforms or whatever in some different format. But yeah, it is so weird and different now. I mean, Martin was doing these movies like the 90s, is just it's just bad versions of this, where Martin's version is, he's a dad with his stick up his ass and it's for boomers explicitly, or it's the Pink Panther series. Which you remember he did those.
I totally forgot
Yeah,
that even happened.
I never saw them. I can't believe they made 2, but I mean it's.
I mean, these were his hits. Yeah, these are the things that made money for him. So he had to keep making this shit, and that's what happened to him.
I do think that the Looney Tunes movie that he did, that's pretty good. I mean,
I know
decent.
It has its fans.
It's I'm not going to try and oversell it, but if we're looking for some kind of oasis of a pleasant experience watching Steve Martin during this time, I'll take this over anything else he was doing. I'll take back.
Isn't that a sad commentary? Just in and of itself. It's a bummer to see it's complicated as like the most successful film he was in the last 10 years. This sort of stuff. I don't know. I think my whole point in bringing this up was like the run he had was legendary. Like these are all weird, unique, really memorable, strong films. Or maybe it was my age at the time, but for me, he made 10 great films. Before 1993. That's crazy.
It was more than I thought before I started adding them up.
Yeah,
like there really was. I mean, as hard as it was to remember any specifics about like how many Cheaper by the Dozens there were versus Pink Panthers, whatever. That black hole seem to have eaten up some of my memory of his like 80s and early 90s run.
Exactly.
And realizing like, oh no, I thought there was like 5 of these. There's like 12.
Yeah, this is exactly what happened to me, and this is why I was so taken. I wanted to talk about him because I was just like, this guy is so many contradictions. He had an incredible, first run of his year. Like it was his hit to miss ratio is much higher than most comedians, and then there's a turning point, and it switches, maybe even gets worse. Like the miss to hit becomes like like 7-1, 8-1. Like you're pointing at Looney Tunes back in action as a high point.
That's about it.
Yeah. And then you've got the cheaper by the dozens, the Pink Panthers, the Bringing Down the House. It's complicated. What do you even say about something like Shop Girl? And it's not like he just. I mean, I guess he did kind of give up to some extent, but I mean, these are the things that people wanted to see him in. And meanwhile, he's got this side career writing plays and books.
Yeah.
And I'd probably collecting art seems very important to him as well.
Yeah.
And
well, his book on Born Standing Up. That's a great book. That's basically all about his journey through stand up. That's a fantastic book.
There's also the plays. He wrote in a number of plays. One of them, Picasso to La Panagile, is one of the great plays of the last 30 years. Probably it gets produced all the time. It's a very successful piece of writing. It's it's about a meeting in the 1910s between Pablo Picasso and Albert Einstein in a bar in Paris, and it's really charming. Plays all the time, always somewhere in the country. So he's still an artist doing his thing. This new show is something he wrote, Only Murders in the Building. It's just the bad run he had here for 20 years is kind of remarkable. It is it's so in odds with the first chunk of his career.
I wanted to watch a somewhat recent movie of his that I hadn't seen before doing this, but then I just didn't. I'll just be honest. So I'll just ask you: Did either of you seen The Big Year?
No.
I was saving up we gotta wrap this up, but I was saving up a joke for and when we return next week for 90 minutes on the competitive bird watching movie with Owen Wilson.
I'm just curious.
I have actually seen 40 minutes of that on TV, and I was sort of really fascinated by it, just going this is not horrible, it's not painful to watch or anything, but it's just I found it really fascinating to think about people reading a script of this and being yeah, this is the one. It's just such purely distilled mediocrity. There's just nothing
I mean, it does seem to play.
It's a competitive bird watching movie. Sounds already it's the log line is putting you to sleep. There would have to be something really special in those pages to overcome that.
If I read the plot, I'm thinking, oh, this is one of those kind of Guffman big, best in show, but it's not. I've never seen it. I just feel like that's what it probably should have been, even though I've never seen it.
Yes.
I mean, the only way I feel like that thing jumps off the page, a scripted version of a Christopher Guest thing doesn't sound good. If it's some sort of I don't know, Coen Brothers thing where they're by 20-minute mark they're covering up a murder or something. Maybe I'm
yeah, it has to escalate to kind of Looney Tunes level. It needs to be Spy versus Spy, where they are attempting murder over it or something pretty quickly.
But I mean, I don't get the sense that it is that. I get the sense that it's just sort of playing to I don't know, Steve Martin's kind of interest in in sort of boring old man pastimes. That seems to sort of have defined a lot of who he is artistically lately. Which is if you can find something in there, fine. But it does not sound like they did this with The Big Year, and that is why I never sought it out. I mean, that's the thing. He lost so much traction for me. For being as obsessed with him as I was, and yeah, now it's not an event when he does a thing for me, and this is hard. It's hard to keep a really genius career going in Hollywood. I mean, obviously,
sure.
So this kind of thing can just happen, and he's obviously been successful by several metrics, but
I feel like he should have the same kind of reverence that Bill Murray does, but he just didn't hammer away at the smaller indie films as much as as Murray did, and so he just doesn't have that. But at the same point, he's
Well,
also
his
not
dramatic turns, I guess, he never had one as successful as Rushmore or
right.
Lost in Translation.
No.
Right.
Whereas, he got like the award nominations. Jim Carrey, if by sheer force of will, eventually got his nominations and so forth. And Martin kind of took a couple of stabs at it, but never quite got there. And I don't know. I guess he was already so successful that he didn't have a burning need to justify himself.
Yeah, and
in
that's fine. Like he doesn't owe it to us to maintain relevance for 40 years.
on the flip side,
it's not a tragedy.
On the flip side, he's not despised by everyone who ever knew him like Chevy. So it's 6 of one and a half dozen of the other.
Still highly revered in comedic circles.
Yeah, but I do feel like you got to go back. You have to have had that relationship with his early work to revere him now.
Yeah.
And I don't think
nobody's watching Pink Panther and being like, "Oh, this is the guy."
The young millennials, I don't think, have much esteem for him. I mean,
Only Murderers might be turning that around because it seems like that does have kind of a younger audience.
Yeah, but putting Selena Gomez in there helps, and she's very good in it from what I've seen. But the thing is, like, he is playing, he's playing the old boring man in it again. I mean, it's to his strength. It's the role he always plays now. A cranky old guy who is sort of lonely and weird, and is very old. I mean, that's the impression you get from it. It's successful though. Like I said, like that's what's kind of nice. It's nice to see him doing a thing that I like now. So that's cool.
If that show can convince just one millennial to spend $4 to rent The Lonely Guy, then it will have served its purpose.
Let's end by saying, our Christmas wish for Steve Martin. You get one more thing out of Steve Martin before he retires for good. What is it you haven't gotten from him that you still want to see? I'm saying Batman villain.
Ooh.
Okay.
I want him to be, I don't know, Hugo Strange or the Black Mask in the Matt Reeves Batman sequel.
I mean, an MCU role would be fun. Why not? Make him be a corporate guy who threatens Ant-Man or something stupid like that.
Well, he could have been Grandmaster in Thor Ragnarok, like instead of Goldblum, like just slotted right in there, just fine.
I mean, yeah, like I don't know. I think
a Batman villain is a little more straight up. I think he could do a villainous. I was thinking like a Mission Impossible villain maybe might be something he could pull off, but I don't know. If we're wanting him to show us something new this late in the game, I think seeing the scary side of Steve Martin might be interesting.
I don't know if there is one though.
What I want to see that I have not seen yet. I want him.
Ebert disagrees.
I want him as Bob Odenkirk's mentor in the sequel to Nobody. That's what I'd like. I want him to be the man who trained Bob Odenkirk's character in a sequel to Nobody.
That seems spot on. Yeah.
I mean, he's
something like that.
The whole thing is, you're supposed to be an average guy who is a great killer, and why can't Steve Martin be the guy that actually trained Odenkirk's character as we because in the sequel to these movies we always have to have that's the mentor, that's the the teacher versus the student and that kind of stuff. So yeah, we need that.
Odenkirk does seem like a next generation version of him in some ways.
Yeah.
That he started out as kind of an oddball, comedy guy that has segued into doing some more dramatic work, but not like full blown, Rushmore stuff.
I could also see him getting bogged down in the same kind of studio comedy, kind of like playing the dad and doing those sort of roles.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it doesn't appear to happen because those movies don't get made as much. But I mean, maybe a blessing in Odenkirk's case, because I would hate to see that happen to him. I mean, it is that same sort of anarchic comic voice, that you don't want to see that tamped down. And he's really found a really good path, through the Breaking Bad universe. But yeah, I think for me, I would like to see Steve Martin end up in a Wes Anderson film. Maybe a significant role.
Pretty good fit.
Yeah, like he could have done, like a Grand Budapest kind of thing. There was an old man role. I mean, the thing is, if Wes Anderson wrote a role that would be good for Steve Martin, he would offer it to Bill Murray probably. So
yeah.
But I don't know.
And
put
if
them-
not him, Willem Dafoe, or
Well,
he's got options.
if you could get Steve Martin and Bill Murray together in a Wes Anderson movie, put them on screen together again, that would be a blast. I would love that.
That would be. Yes, I'll take that.
All right.
Maybe a more attainable dream. Maybe just if he could show up for one sketch on next season of I Think You Should Leave, that'd be nice.
Oh yes.
That is
The
good.
Odenkirk thing
Yeah.
made me think of that.
Oh,
he could have been the
God.
Odenkirk role
For
in
sure.
that diner sketch.
Yeah.
Steve Martin, we've got lots of ideas for you. Just reach out to us. We'll guide you through this difficult part of your career.
Put your penis cream down and listen to us.
All right. That's it. We went long here. All right. Thank you very much, Chris. We talked about Steve Martin. All right. We'll do some other thing like this and again and later. Thanks, everyone, for listening.
Thanks, appreciate it.
We are the three amigos. We are the three amigos.